The Hunger Games came out in 2012 and featured a dystopian society split into 12 districts who all had to send 2 teenage tributes to fight to the death in a televised arena. I mean, you've seen the movie, right? This series had massive hype from the get-go because of its concept and the books it was based on. Plus, it came out right after Harry Potter came to a close, so audiences were looking for that next big series featuring young adult characters. I've honestly seen the first Hunger Games movie a million times, and it will really never get old.
I volunteer as tribute!
Yeah, there's a couple parts that are a little corny, but overall it's definitely one of the best movies out there. The film is really consistent tonally, with great world building and a very interesting set of side characters to surround Katniss. Plus, President Snow makes a great villain, and although he doesn't exactly do much in this installment, he very confidently and calmly represents the problem of the Capitol and the games as a whole. I like that the movie version added the scenes with him and Seneca that weren't in the book because they give you great insight to how the games retains its viewership after 74 years without a rebellion in sight.
Why do you think we have a winner? Hope. A little hope is effective. A lot of hope is dangerous. A spark is fine, as long as it's contained.
It's a theme I wish had been carried through into Mockingjay, but we'll get to that crapshoot in a moment. Probably the main thing that makes this first movie so popular is its premise of the games. When Katniss goes to the Capitol and we see them all training, and then the actual survival portion of the movie, this is the stuff that's most interesting. People love to watch survival type stuff like this because it's like stepping into the character's shoes and seeing how they survive without having the burden of having to survive yourself. Of course, even when we watch this for the first time, you know that Katniss will survive, and frankly, it would be bad writing if she didn't. And you might also think they'll somehow find a way for Peeta to make it since he's getting so much screen time. But the joy is in the how, which is why it has such a high rewatch value. As much as this series is against the idea of watching kids fight to the death, that is somehow also its biggest draw. It's not that we want to see teenagers being forced to fight to the death, but we enjoy watching Katniss use her talents and her knowledge to figure out how to survive because she's like the self-insert character here, so we want to see her survive and win. It's different for us than the actual audiences in the Capitol since we know this is fake and it's acting and no one will actually die. Being in the games for real would suck, living in this world would suck, but seeing this interesting new world and the way it works is cool, and there's actually a lot of thrill in watching how everything goes down and how the various characters approach these games. We already get to see the difference between people like Katniss and Peeta who are here by force and people like the careers who are here because their class status among the districts allows them to not only be okay with what the Capitol is doing, but even be prideful about it. It's analogous to people who join the military because they have no other option versus people who join because they're totally cool with doing their country's dirty work, even if it's not morally valid. While the movie is a dystopia and it criticizes a world of propaganda and a near-totalitarian government that forces its constituents to be entirely reliant on them, there's also a lot of analogy to reality TV.
They just want a good show, that's all they want.
Especially those competition reality shows like American Idol or America's Got Talent, where people come to chase their dreams and they usually have some sort of sob story or super underdog characteristic that makes people root for them. And not to knock on these shows because it's obviously not the same as a live stream death match, but there's some similarities. Like in the Hunger Games, the contestants are made pretty and paraded in front of the people who might sponsor them during the actual games.
Glimmer, are you prepared?
Yes, Caesar, I am very prepared.
I like it.
It's supposed to be this whole we're proud of our districts and we're proud of the chance to represent and we're proud to be here type thing, but it's two entirely different experiences.
They train in a special academy until they're 18, then they volunteer.
The Capitol audience and of course the careers treat it as that and see things like the ceremony as hype and enjoyable, while people like Katniss are literally here days out from fighting to the death, expected to go on and put on a show for people who are safe in their homes.
I just can't afford to think like that.
And she can't even be grumpy about it either, like Haymitch keeps telling them,
When you're in the middle of the games, some water or even some matches can mean the difference between life and death. And those things only come from sponsors. And to get sponsors, you have to make people like you.
And that's a commentary that progresses through the movie where Katniss has to pretend to fall for Peeta and give the viewers something to root for. This is what happens in reality TV too. They try to force situations that aren't organic in order to make the audience care more.
I can sell the star-crossed lovers from District 12.
We are not star-crossed lovers.
It's a television show. And being in love with that boy might just get you sponsors, which could save your damn life.
Hell, they even do this in scripted stuff, which is where love triangles come into play. I personally hate love triangles. I find them so unnecessary and ridiculous, and almost always it's bad writing forced into a show or movie series in order to get the viewers to talk about it. And unfortunately, it works. Originally, there wasn't even going to be a Gale versus Peeta thing for Katniss, but Suzanne Collins' publisher or somebody told her to do it so that it would make the books more popular, and I guess it worked. The way I even found out about this series back then was people I knew talking about Team Peeta or Team Gale, which is very reminiscent of Twilight era's Team Jacob versus Edward. Everywhere there's ever actually been a love triangle, it's always sucked and pissed everyone off, and whether canon made the right choice or the wrong choice, people still fight over it years later. But again, that's the point. It prolongs the discourse so that people are talking about the story forever. The love triangle in this series was literally so dumb. Like, y'all could have kept Gale as Katniss's close friend, and that would not change the emotional impact of the story at all. The only difference it would make is for 2 seconds in Catching Fire, Katniss wouldn't be kissing Gale and caught on Snow's camera doing that. They could have picked any other thing he caught her doing that he didn't approve of. But speaking of catching fire, this is where the series starts to struggle a little bit for me. It's still good, but not nearly as good as the first movie. We get more world building, we get more of that propaganda, we get the aftermath, but all this literally takes an hour, maybe more. And the quarter quell games in this movie take up the shorter half of the movie. I know the series isn't supposed to be exclusively about the games themselves, but the pacing, man. They could have significantly shortened all the pre-game stuff. Everything between the aftermath of the games, through the district tour, through the announcement of the quarter quell, making new tentative alliances, all that stuff is important, but it drags so much it doesn't carry any momentum, and the film feels heavily stacked towards the latter portion. I do still like the movie overall. I think it's interesting to see what happens after someone wins, and the whole facade of having the victors do a tour where they basically say, we totally love the Capitol despite all the crap they put us through, and the peacekeepers killing anyone in those district audiences who breathes wrong or shows any sign of solidarity. Like, that's all really good and important stuff.
From now on, your job is to be a distraction so people forget what the real problems are.
Show them that she is one of us.
I heard apparently Suzanne Collins came up with the idea for this series when she saw news of Iraq war stuff on one channel and then switched and saw a reality show on another channel. So I think that manifests especially in this movie with the propaganda the Capitol is trying to put out and pretending like this is all normal and there's nothing to be questioned.
There's another level to the Hunger Games which is much more contemporary. That deals with our sort of fascination now with reality television. The games are televised across the country of Pan Am. One night I was lying in bed and I was just sort of channel surfing on television. I was going through images of reality television where there were these young people competing for $1 million or a bachelor or whatever. And then I was flipping and I was seeing footage from the Iraq War. And these two things began to sort of fuse together in a very unsettling way.
That part where Peeta mentioned Katniss was carrying their baby and everyone freaked out while at the same time being supporters and avid viewers of a televised death match is so uncanny to how our actual world works, which is the exact point of dystopia as a genre.
We're so bombarded with imagery, and I worry that we're all getting a little desensitized to it. There's just too much of our lives that we're putting on television. And I think it's fine if you get desensitized to a sitcom or something like that. But when you're watching real footage, actual tragedy unfolding before you, that's different. It is real life, and it isn't going to go away when the commercial break comes on.
The actual concept of the quarter quell games is so interesting. I actually wish so bad I hadn't read the books when these movies came out, because the freaking clock arena, clever as hell.
This entire arena seems to be laid out like a clock, with a new threat every hour, but they stay only within their wedge. It all starts with the lightning. Then the blood rain, fog, monkeys. That's the first 4 hours.
It's interesting to see this time Katniss isn't alone but part of an alliance, because the last movie, the alliance was against her. I think also this is the movie where Katniss really starts to care about Peeta as more than just a teammate, so to speak, or at the very least, it's more apparent how she sees him. And it's not just for show anymore.
What about you?
Nobody needs me.
I do. I need you.
But after everything that went down, the movie ends with Katniss giving the camera an extremely corny, determined, and pissed look. Like, okay? They couldn't have picked any other way to end the movie. Yeah, I know she's mad they couldn't get Peeta out of the Capitol, but it all ends so awkwardly. And even though it's supposed to be more of a cliffhanger type ending than the first one, it should have packed more of a punch. But I guess they were setting us up for disappointment, because that, in a nutshell, is what Mockingjay is. When I read the books, I always thought the first book was decent, the second one was whatever, and the third one was unreadable. The Mockingjay movies provide the same level of satisfaction that their book did. None. Splitting up the already boring-ass book into 2 movies was a massive mistake. I know they wanted to drive up box office numbers following the example set by Deathly Hallows Part 1 and 2, but the Deathly Hallows book was massive, and they split up the movies because they literally could not finish the story in one movie. Twilight, which I've never seen, split up Breaking Dawn as well, so I guess Hunger Games thought they were following this new trend of splitting up your last chapter. But it so did not work for Mockingjay. So little happens across the 2 Mockingjay movies, like my god, I didn't even watch the last movie when it originally came out, having seen all the others in theaters. I only watched it for the first time last year, and it's completely awful. After they get Katniss out, she finds out about District 13 and President Coin, and we set up for Katniss to do some anti-Capitol propaganda, including extremely corny and awkward scenes of Katniss trying to play the part of their Mockingjay. I get that she's reluctant in all this and she's being forced to do it, but it's literally so hard to watch, it's like a failed attempt at comedy. On the flip side, Peeta's being brainwashed at the Capitol to do propaganda on their behalf, so we're watching both sides kind of mirror each other.
Peeta is the Capitol's weapon, the same way you're ours.
Which is sort of the point of these 2 movies. Like, later on, Coin bombs everyone under the guise of the Capitol to get the last of the people to turn against Snow. And later on, she wants to do another Hunger Games using kids from the Capitol, which is why Katniss kills her so she doesn't perpetuate that cycle of violence. And this is all great commentary, but the package it comes in, it's literally so boring. The plot of the book, and consequently the movies, is just really terrible and feels like the wrong way to finish out the series. I think this saga suffers from something I call loss of premise, which is when a series is based heavily around a premise or idea, in this case the actual games, and then loses that premise in later installments but isn't able to sustain the story without it.
Welcome to the 76th Hunger Games.
Now, I know that Mockingjay kind of showed that their actual war and survival was a bit like the games in real life with the mutts and the pods, but the whole storyline just felt so cluttered as if it wasn't even the same series anymore. Premise is what differentiates these dystopian stories, because you can have a generic dystopia and call it a day, or you can create a specific world environment that carries through the series. Mockingjay just feels like a typical rebellion, and I generally find rebellion-type movies or shows to be kind of corny if not done in an interesting way. I find myself naturally comparing Mockingjay to Deathly Hallows because they're both two-part saga finishers, but while Mockingjay was doing this and that and chasing its own tail, Deathly Hallows felt very end of series, end of world, and even though they could have suffered from loss of premise with Harry not being at Hogwarts, the series wasn't based around the concept of the school. The school was simply a backdrop to the story.
And now for the names of missing witches and wizards. These are confirmed.
The scene of the trio traveling on foot while the radio says names of dead or missing wizards is probably the most dystopian it feels, and I really like that sort of uneasy, we're all alone, we're underdogs, but right now it's looking more like dead dogs vibe to a dystopian film, which I saw in the first Hunger Games, but not in Mockingjay. And while both Mockingjay and Deathly Hallows focus on a war, Mockingjay's war just feels so convoluted and generic. Also, I feel like Mockingjay would have been the perfect opportunity to explore the fact that these kids are too young to be dealing with the war. But after the first Hunger Games showed the brutality of young people having to fight to the death to metaphorically showcase the sacrifices of children in war, they kind of dropped that altogether in the rest of the series. Like, do we talk about how Katniss and Peeta and Gale are literally 18 years old? Obviously, we see Prim, who's visibly a kid still and training to be a nurse. Given that it's a dystopia, they already didn't have any chance at a normal life the way we would understand it. But I feel like maybe there's something more they could have done here. On top of that, there's almost no character development for Katniss or anyone else in Mockingjay apart from her agreeing to be the face of the rebellion and killing Coin. It just doesn't feel like an end. It just feels like they had some points to make but didn't know what to do with the story, so they kind of just did whatever. Actually, the way Katniss and the crew spent 2 movies going around doing all these missions, it kind of felt like Call of Duty Black Ops, like a video game with characters that have to accomplish XYZ missions in order to win the overall war. Except Black Ops had a fantastic storyline, and Mockingjay did not. Catching Fire felt like an expansion and forward progression of the first installment, but Mockingjay just felt like someone wrote a fanfic to an unfinished duology and the writer saw it and said, hey, might as well use this for the ending. The prequel kind of feels like fanfic too, though trust me, you're better off not seeing or reading it at all, so might as well just listen to me gripe about it anyway.